Hello again and welcome to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here each week discussing issues of topical interest and interesting guests. And this one of our favorite guests. We have her on about as much as anybody.
Well, we really do, and I want to tell you something. I'm really tired. Not tired of her. I'm really fatigued. And we're going to have her on today to talk about Fight Fatigue, a book that Ann Bauman has written and is in wide publication and wide reading, as I might add. She's an excellent medical practitioner that talks about issues that are important to everybody, including women, and she's going to do that again today, and we're pleased to bring that to you.
Dr. Ann Bauman coming up today on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
At Chesapeake Energy, here's a few of our favorite Hornets. Alexis likes reading. Sam enjoys history. Alec loves math. Chesapeake is proud to support both the Oklahoma City NBA Hornets and the Young Hornets at Horace Mann Elementary, where over 150 Chesapeake employees mentor to children each week. The students gain a lot from the experience, but not as much as we do. Chesapeake Energy, committed to building a better Oklahoma.
Said I'd save with Cox Digital Telephone. Well, my bill came and... Could this be right?
You may be surprised how much you save with Cox Digital Telephone. That's why over 1.5 million people have switched.
So this really is a total. Lovely. Because I think I found a good use for the savings.
With Cox, there's no waiting for the other shoe to drop. The only surprise is there's no surprise at all.
I don't see anything wrong in the education community suing the state.
What is good for the state in the future? Do we give tax breaks now?
The Democrats never asked that question for 60 years.
I don't want to use the word civil, but sometimes there's a little more methodical debate that takes place.
It's more than just talk when you go inside the issues with Pat Hall and Jim Dunlap. Produced by Cox Communications exclusively for the Cox Channel.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Once again, we are very pleased to have back Dr. Ann Bauman. We've been arguing on the set here about how many times she's been here. It's either 4, 5, or 6, depending on which one of us you believe. But we're glad you're back.
Thank you.
She is a frequent radio and television presenter in this area and others. She did her undergraduate work at the University of Detroit and got her medical degree at Wayne State University. She is now the medical director for women's health and community relations for Integris Health. She is married and has 3 children and is an author of a book that we want to talk about today. But before we do that, welcome to The Verdict.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
We're going to get to your book in a moment. You've been associated with women's issues when you've come on our show before. Earlier this month, the Oklahoma Women's Summit. What took place there?
That was a pretty exciting summit. Many people participating. I happened to participate in a session where we talked about fitness and health. Area is very close to my heart. We had Representative Jenny McDaniel from Tulsa, Phil Kraft, who's talking about a wonderful program for state employees of how they can get a health mentor to help them get healthier. Charlotte Lankard from the James L. Hall Mind Body Spirit Institute for talking about how mind body is important, and I talked about what I usually talk about, healthy lifestyle changes. We were just a part of this huge summit and the Governor's Conference on Women.
We've entitled this show, Dr. Bowman, Fight Fatigue, which is the name of your book. Tell us why you came to write this book.
Well, I came to write it because in my practice I see many tired people. Majority of them are women, although it's interesting, the response to the book, I'm getting a lot of men saying the same thing. But what happens is people will come in and they're tired. We check for anemia, we check for iron deficiency, we check for cancers, we check for thyroid problems. All the tests are normal, still tired. So as a primary care doctor, I'm still taking care of these patients, and I came to recognize where it was coming from, the importance of the mind-body connection, and came up with this plan to help my patients do better.
Let's take a look at the cover of the book. You can find this in most of the bookstores around Oklahoma City. And I guess my first question from looking at the cover of the book is, how did you get your hair to fly up like that? What do you do? Do you spin your head around, or does a fan come in? How do they do that?
Let me tell you, I said supermodels really do have stamina. This was only 3 hours and I was exhausted. They had a fan blowing and turn your head. I had a sore neck the next day. Chin up, eyes open, smile, not too wide. It was really kind of fun to do.
What sort of immediate impact are you hearing from people who've had a chance to read the book?
I'm really getting just wonderful reviews on it, and it's been interesting because a number of the reviewers have said, I'm underlining this and this and this, because I tried to make it fun and I tried to make it really practical for people to be able to use. It's got a lot of stories in it, stories about my life, my family, my patients.
Do you mind giving us one of your life experiences that you relate in the book?
Yes, one of the things I talk about is how we can assume, especially women, that our family members are going to be disappointed in us if we do something, and this keeps us from doing things that are healthy. And an example was, we moved here in 1989, and it was summertime, and we were unpacking boxes, and it was my day to run. I'm a runner. And I started to get ready to run, and my husband walked through and said, are you going for a run? And I said, yes. And then my daughter walked through and said, are you going for a run? And she was only 4, and I said, yes. And I immediately started to think, maybe I shouldn't be running. Maybe they think I should be working or should be here. I'm working and I'm at home. I shouldn't go out and run. And I almost didn't run that day because I thought they're going to be disappointed in me. Now, what I found was that when I really thought about what they said and how they answered me, there was nothing in their tone or their comment that showed any kind of disapproval for me running. They were just asking the question. It was me who was interpreting it, that this was something I should not do. And that's what we women do very commonly. We assume that we know what people expect, and so we base our actions on that when it's not necessarily true.
Yeah. How prevalent in today's society is fatigue, and particularly first talk about adults, then talk about children?
Okay, well, first of all, fatigue is very prevalent. Fatigue is the #1 reason that women go to the doctor. #1 instead of everything else. Fatigue is very prevalent also among men, because what we're doing is we're multitasking all the time. Used to be when we left the office, we were home. We're not anymore. Our computers come there. We used to drive in our cars and at least listen to music or the radio. Now, what are we doing? On cell phones and trying to work and multitask when we do that. So I think very often we are overextending ourselves, and that's part of the problem. It's a very important correlation with the mind-body connection. If emotionally you're not well, physically you will not feel well.
What is chronic fatigue syndrome?
Very different from what I'm talking about in the book, and I make that distinction. Chronic fatigue syndrome is actually very rare. Chronic fatigue syndrome is a series of symptoms including sore throat, swollen lymph nodes, low-grade temperature, sometimes memory issues associated with severe fatigue. I've had 2 patients in 25, 28 years of practice who actually had this. And the one woman, it took her 3 years before she could stand long enough to take a shower. Young woman. Most of the time with chronic fatigue syndrome, people know almost to the minute of when it started. That's different than chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue means that you're tired. You get up in the morning, you're tired. You go to work, you're tired. You come home, you're tired. You do everything at home, you're tired. You go to bed at night, you're tired. And in fact, the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, came up with a new term called idiopathic chronic fatigue, because people didn't fit chronic fatigue syndrome, but they were still tired. And idiopathic means we don't know the reason for it.
I don't know doctors ever admitted that.
That's what we gave it. Idiopathic, great word.
That's why they gave you a word you wouldn't understand.
Exactly. We know what it means.
Well, let's focus on children and fatigue. I guess there are all kinds of studies that the fatigued child does not do as well in school as the child that's getting enough rest and doing other things. It's not, I'm sure, a matter simply of sleep. Do you see fatigue in children? Is it remaining the same? Is it increasing? What do you see?
Well, one of the things that happens with our children, and I'm an internist, so I see adults in my practice. I don't see children in my practice, but I will say that a couple of things are happening. Number one, our children are sleep deprived. Remember when we used to have that bedtime? You were in bed by 8 or 9, and then you got up in the morning. Kids are on their computers. They are staying up later as well. Number two, we caffeinate our children very highly, and caffeine is a stimulant. It bounces you up and drops you down, but it can affect your sleep. 3, we keep our children multitasking too. If they don't have something going on every evening of the week, then we're wondering if they're being productive. And we're not giving them the time just to stop, relax, do nothing, dream, do some of those other things. We're keeping them so busy. And then we also have the lack of exercise with children as well as adults. Exercise gives you energy. So our children are not getting out and exercising and building energy that way as well.
We're going to take our first break, come back. We're going to go through some of the elements that you talk about in your book, Fight Fatigue. Dr. Ann Bauman's our guest on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. R.S.M. McGladrey. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. R.S.M. McGladrey. In Oklahoma City, the phone number is 405-843-5311.
As someone who works in Oklahoma's oil and natural gas industry, I know how hard we're working to meet our current energy needs. But there are a few things all of us can do to reduce the amount of energy we use, starting right around the house, like installing a $20 programmable thermostat and turning it down, because each degree above 68 can increase a bill by as much as 3%. It's amazing how putting a little effort in can keep a lot of energy from getting out. For more energy-saving ideas, visit oerb.com.
Knowing the fundamentals of basketball pushed me all the way to the NBA. Now let me help you reach your goals. Join me and Oklahoma City's top coaches for a great week of basketball at the Chris Paul Youth Basketball Camp. Presented by the Oklahoma Ford dealers, Devon Energy, Loves, and the Oklahomans. Choose from 2 great locations at Heritage Hall or Oklahoma City University, June 19th through the 23rd. For more information or to register, visit www.chrispaul3.com.
Hello? Anybody home?
Hi.
Digital Max. Welcome to the neighborhood. Hello, kid. Whoa. I haven't seen a digital tangle like that since... Yeah. You need Cox Connections. With one connection, you get the whole digital enchilada. Kind of like this.
Wow.
What are you waiting for?
Get one connection to all your digital services from Cox.
I think I pulled something.
Your friend in the digital age.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Our guest is Dr. Ann Bauman. We're discussing fatigue.
Yes, and in the first segment you used a phrase I wanted to come back to and ask you to expand on a little bit. You referred to the mind-body connection. What do you mean by that?
This is so important, and I know your former partner Jim Hall was just so instrumental in this particular field. Mind-body connection, neuropsychoimmunology is the medical term. Again, we have that terminology, but it basically means that that we have a lot of control from the mind on bodily functions, and we're finding that the immune system is extremely important for this. There's been a lot of research done, fascinating studies of how much we can control outcomes of things just by how we think about it. And I talk about this in Fight Fatigue so that people can understand it's not just, oh, that's interesting science. It plays a role in your own life. And that's what I have really determined, that for so many people they're fatigued because they are not in mind-body balance.
It sounds broader than simply being, oh, I'm an optimist or oh, I'm a pessimist. And I think I and the others may think of it kind of categorically that way. It sounds broader than that.
Absolutely. There was this fascinating study done actually in the 1940s. They took gentlemen who had been to in World War II and were graduates of Harvard, and they had them fill out surveys about their war experiences. They all had similar war experiences, but as you might expect, some of them had different reactions, some positive, some negative to those experiences. Then they followed them with physical exams for the next 30 years. Their doctors would examine them, send in reports, and they found that those who had the most negative reaction to their war experiences actually had more disease, significantly, statistically significant more disease between the ages of 40 and 60, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. Now after age 60, that group, the negative group, still had more disease, but it wasn't to the level of statistical significance. So it does say to you how you view the world makes a difference, and everyone seems to think that you're either born an optimist or born a pessimist. The glass is half full or the glass is half empty. You can change how you view the world, and that's part of what we're talking about. My mantra is insight is not enough. You have to take that understanding, that insight of why you do what you do, and use it to change behavior, and that's where the steps come in.
The title of the book is Fight Fatigue. The subtitle is 6 Simple Steps to Maximize Your Energy. Go through these 6 simple steps. What can you tell our viewers?
This has to do with what I just said. First, you will develop insight into why you do what you do, and then you'll use that insight to change behavior. So many of our fatigue issues are related to the relationships in our life. Just like I mentioned that relationship with my husband and my daughter that almost kept me from exercising. If you multiply that by the number of experiences we have with people we work with, people we meet at the store, our friends, our family, our relatives. If you multiply those experiences, then you will find just how important it is, and your energy can just be stolen away. So the first step you do is analyze why you do what you do. You look at an encounter that you had one day, just one encounter a day, and you look at how that encounter made you feel. Happy, sad, angry, positive, whatever it was. And you do that on a daily basis, because repetition, you have to get in the habit of analyzing your situations. So you look at that. The next time you look at how you felt just before that happened, before an event happened. Doesn't matter what it is. And that's because we often find that our emotions before will color how we respond. So if you were annoyed beforehand, you may end up having a negative situation with somebody because of your reaction. So you start to understand that. You keep doing that. The third thing is just what I told you about. You start to evaluate and analyze your assumptions. Challenge those assumptions, because just like I thought, oh my gosh, my husband and daughter don't want me to run, I was wrong. That had nothing to do. They were just simply asking. So I had to decide if what I thought was going to happen actually was what happened. And this is what people have to do in the third step. Again, you do it repetitively. See if what you thought would happen actually did. See how often you're right in your assumptions about how your family members or your coworkers are going to respond to things. Once you've done that, the 3 analysis steps, then you start to change behavior. And you start to look at your barriers to being successful. This is the chapter where I talk about the E word, exercise, because you can't get your energy back if you're not going to look at the barriers you set up to exercise, the things that make you not able to exercise. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too windy. If you wait for a perfect day to exercise in Oklahoma, you will exercise one day a year. And we've probably already had it. So that's what you have to start to look at, those barriers to doing healthy things, and start to change them.
Going back to what you just said before exercise, a fellow that was a good friend of mine is now deceased, but he was on this show with you, as a matter of fact, on the methamphetamine, J.C. McNutt.
Yes.
He used to say, if you're playing the old tapes in your head, take them out and put in new tapes. In other words, if you're thinking old thoughts, reevaluate. I think it's just a different way of saying what you've just said.
That is exactly right. You know, Albert Einstein said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome.
You know, I'm not hearing much about nutrition, and I expected to. When we started the show, I expected this book to be nutrition-filled.
I know, nutrition and exercise.
Because you talk so much about nutrition in some of the other episodes that we've had.
And I do talk about that, but in this book, my approach has not been on how you eat in terms of your energy. There's lots out there about that because I'm trying to get at really the root cause, which is even before this, all right? Because these barriers are the same sorts of barriers that keep you from starting to cook more in a more healthy way, stopping the fast food, going on a diet, going off of it. So unless you start to evaluate how to change your behavior, you won't be successful for any of those kinds of changes.
What about sleep apnea? What about a spouse who snores and keeps you up all night?
Sleep is definitely restorative. We tend to think of sleep as we're doing nothing, but that's absolutely not true. We're doing a lot while we sleep. We're restoring ourselves into balance, and it is part of it. Sleep apnea, that's a situation where somebody does snore and they stop breathing. You know, they'll be then they start breathing again, like the demonstration there.
That was good.
But that's what happens is they stop breathing and then their carbon dioxide level builds up in the blood and they snort to get started again. And this is not only disruptive for the person who can't sleep, but for the spouse, absolutely. So that's why I always say to people, if you are tired, get into your doctor. First thing to do. Before fight fatigue, you get into your doctor and you make sure you do have a good physical examination to make sure there is not something physiologic or metabolic. And then once there isn't, then you really have to start to look at some of these other things.
Let me ask a twofold question. Do men and women differ on how they become fatigued and how they handle fatigue?
There are very interesting differences in men and women, and it starts out with how we develop our self-esteem. Men learn very early on that self-esteem comes from accomplishment of tasks. Women learn very early on that self-esteem comes from relationships with others, and this affects us through our lives. Neither is right, neither is wrong. For men, if all you care about are your accomplishments, you will have no relationship with your family, your children, etc., and that's a pretty uncomfortable, unhappy life. For women, we run the risk of becoming people pleasers. So if our self-esteem only comes from our relationships with others, everyone has to think we're wonderful, or our self-esteem plummets. So we overextend ourselves. And women have more of a tendency to overextend themselves than men do for their relationships. Men will have a tendency to overextend themselves for their tasks, for their accomplishment and their work. And so there are definite differences in this. Women just constantly worry about their relationships. Men often don't worry quite as much. And I'll just give you a brief example. I would take my daughter to school when she was in middle school. She's a junior in college now. And this was a bonding time for me. This was very important for me. And sometimes we would find that we would argue the whole time over there. You know, and here she'd get out of the car and she'd be perfectly fine and I'd be worried about it all day long. And I realized the change was that I did start to get up earlier, and she got up earlier, so if we weren't rushed, we didn't argue. That was the part of establishing and evaluating the relationship. But what I found is I asked my husband about it because sometimes he would take her to school. And I said to him, I said, do you and she get into arguments? He said, no, we don't even talk on the way to school. His was accomplishing the task, get her to school. Mine was the relationship.
We have just a few seconds left. I wanted to ask you about athletes. Have we learned anything from all the studies that have been done on Olympic athletes and things like that about fatigue? And I'm sorry, we had about 20 seconds.
Okay. What we know with the athletes is, first of all, that they're in a very different situation than the rest of us. They are very much taken care of with their training. We don't have that sort of thing. We have to worry that they don't push too hard. Obviously, the performance-enhancing drugs are an issue with them that always have to be watched. But they're being more controlled than we are. We need to be more rigorous about watching it.
All right. Dr. Ann Bauman is our guest. Her book is Fight Fatigue. Wish you well with the book, and I hope you'll come back and be a guest here on The Verdict real soon.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Kent and I'll have a final word when we get back.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Cox Channel. More sports. More fans. More cheerleaders. More fun. Nobody does more local sports, and nobody does it better.
Hi, honey. You've got to check this out.
What? What are we listening to?
I had digital phone service installed today.
It sounds just like before.
I know, but it's going to save us a ton of money.
With Cox Digital Telephone, you'll save big every month. Keep your same phone number and get your favorite calling features. Just pay less.
That does sound good.
You should hear the upstairs phone.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Dr. Ann Bauman's book is called Fight Fatigue. And then the subtitle is, as I grab the copy of the book, 6 Simple Steps to Maximize Your Energy. It's available at area bookstores. She's a wonderful guest. You can get more information about her on her website as well, Ann Bauman, MD.com. And also you can go there and if you want to order the book off the internet.
Yes. They have it at the Jim Talbert's Full Circle Bookstore, Borders, and the likely places. Next week, we're going to have Guy Ames, Reverend Guy Ames, a Methodist minister who's going to come and talk to us about some interesting things that are going on in not just the Methodist Church, but the church in the United States. I think you'll find it fascinating.
Our website is theverdict.tv. Go there and tell us about a show you'd like to see on The Verdict. We'll see you next week.
The preceding program was produced by the Production Services Group at Cox Communications, exclusively for the Cox Channel.